Hi everyone, welcome to this module on object storage capabilities. In this module, we will look into various advanced features such as pre-authenticated request, cross-region copy, multi-part uploads, etc. So let's first start with managing access and authentication. In the previous demo, we uploaded an object to a standard bucket and we were able to retrieve the object by changing the access level from private to public. So let's look at some of the other things we can do with objects in the OCI object storage service. So pre-authenticated request is a way to let users access a bucket or an object without having their own credentials. So as you can see here, creating a pre-authenticated request is pretty straightforward. You can create a pre-authenticated request either on the bucket or on the object, and you can have a variety of options whether you just want reads on the object, writes on the object, or read and write both, right? And we'll actually go and show this in a quick demo. Once you create a pre-authenticated request, users can access the object. Let's say you're creating this for object using a URL like the one shown here. So you can see here, this is sort of a URL, and this portion gets appended to the URL, and that shows that it's a pre-authenticated request. And you can see the prefix here /p. Uh, if you remember from the previous module, /n is the namespace, /b is the bucket, /o is the object, and /p here shows that this URL, this object is being accessed using a pre-authenticated request. You can revoke the links at any time. So suppose you give users access to a bucket or an object without having their own credentials, and their job is done, you can always revoke the links, and they will have they will lose the access to the object or the bucket going forward. Now we looked into this a little bit in the previous demo as well, on the concept of public buckets. So when you create a bucket at time of creation is considered private, and access to the bucket requires authentication and authorization. We created a bucket, we uploaded an object, and then we could not access the object, right? Because it said the bucket doesn't exist, or you don't have access you're not authorized for the to the bucket, you don't have access to the bucket. So that's the behavior when you create a bucket. But when you have an option to change that and have your users access the bucket and the objects using anonymous and unauthenticated access. So they don't have to be authenticated. They don't have to have any kind of authorization like policies to be written or anything. They can just go and in an anonymous fashion, they can read the contents of that bucket. When you do that, again, the thing to keep in mind, it can be a security nightmare. You have been seeing some of these reports in the press. So unless you have a really a need, you should not change the visibility of a bucket from private to public. And also thing to keep in mind that changing the type of access doesn't affect existing pre-authenticated requests. So if you have an existing pre-authenticated request, it will still work. So if you go from a private bucket to a public bucket, public will give access, unauthenticated anonymous access. But if you have given your pre-authenticated request to users, they can still use it and it will still work fine. So let me quickly jump to the console, and before I talk about the next feature, show pre-authenticated request in action. So we were in the object storage part of the OCI console, and we had created two buckets: archive bucket, which is for archival long-term retention and backup, and then we had test bucket, which was a standard tier bucket. Now right now you can see it's private. So if I want to access this object, if I want to access this particular object which we uploaded in the previous demo, you can see that it gives me an error saying the bucket doesn't exist. We know bucket exists, or you're not authorized to access it. So we don't have authorization, right? That's the reason we are not able to access it, because it's in a private bucket, and it doesn't allow for anonymous unauthenticated access. So what we could do here is create a pre-authenticated request. So if I come here, I say pre-authenticated request, that name is fine, the default name I picked up. I could create it at the bucket level, or I could create it at the object level. So if I want to go more granular, I could do it at the object level. And now I can also say what kind of access I want, whether it's read, write, or read and write both. Read is fine. And then I can also choose the time till which this link will be valid. and you have to choose this time. You cannot just do create a pre-authenticated request for infinite amount of time. You have to have a time bound access, right? So by default it picks a week's worth of time, but you could go even longer, so a week is fine. And I create this pre-authenticated request, and now I need to copy this link because it goes away after that, and it's not shown again because for security reasons, right? So I copy this, and if I go back to my link I had earlier and I paste this new link now, and you can see the part where the pre-authenticated request comes in with this slash p, everything which follows after that, that shows that this object is now being accessed using a pre-authenticated request. So there you go, right? I can see my my object here, the Mount Rainier picture I had uploaded earlier, right? So the pre-authenticated requests you have created are available right here. I can come here, I can delete it, right? If I don't want it anymore, it's as simple as I would delete it. And if I delete this one and go back to my link earlier, if my users have it and they try to bring it up, you can see that it will not work, right? Because it's gone. So it's as simple as that. If you change your it's pretty straightforward to create a pre-authenticated request on the bucket. So the way you would do that is if you click on the buckets here, you have an option to create a pre-authenticated request on the bucket itself, right? And similar to the object, if you do this, now you get this URL, and you can list objects in your bucket if you use this URL, right? And you could do certain operations using this URL. So hopefully it gives you a quick overview of how pre-authenticated requests work. Let's talk about the second feature, which is sort of this advanced feature on cross-region copy. So one of the key requirements for object storage is to copy objects to other buckets in the same region, and to buckets in other regions, right? So the use cases can be you're taking a backup, and you have a DR situation where you want to create your database from that backup in another region, or you want to create a compute instance from a custom image you have in another region. So for those kind of scenarios, you need to copy your objects from one region to another region, right? Because object storage is a regional service, so you have access within the region but not outside the region. So this feature lets you do that. So creating this is really straightforward. You provide, of course, the namespace is the unique identifier you have. So provide the namespace. You provide the destination region where you want to copy your objects. You have to provide a destination bucket, and then very important, one thing you have to keep in mind is and then the copy happens. But one thing very important you have to keep in mind is you must authorize the service to manage objects on your behalf. So you have to write a policy for every region. This is the home region where you are copying from. Otherwise the cross region copy doesn't work. So you can see here there is a policy. If you don't write this policy, cross region copy probably would is cross region copy is not going to work. And you also need to specify an existing target bucket. If you don't do that, it will not let you do the copy. And today the restriction is around bulk copying is not supported. So it's a little bit tedious where you have to copy one by one. It's on the roadmap where you would be able to take lots of objects and then just copy them in the same region or copy them to another region. So that feature is on the roadmap uh, in the next few months. So let me quickly, and the last thing here is objects cannot be copied from archive storage, right? Because archive, again, as we looked into in the previous module, is you cannot change the tier from standard to archive and vice versa, right? So this feature is only applicable today for standard. You cannot use this for archive. There's also like a 4-hour minimum restore period there, so you cannot do cross-region copy using archive storage. So first things first, I'm in Ashburn region. Let me go to Phoenix and create a bucket there, right? So we will copy our objects to Phoenix region, right? I'm in the same compartment. The default name, let me just call it a test bucket or something. And it's a standard tier. If I do archive, copy will not be supported. And I just create a bucket here, right? Now, this bucket is right now empty. There is nothing inside here. So let me switch back to Ashburn, and I have a test bucket here. and I can actually copy this object, right? Copying is really straightforward. I say click copy. I pick my destination region. It can be the same region, it can be another region, that's fine. And the bucket I just created is called test, right? So I'll just do that. And then it has various values here, where I can where are various options here. So I could choose to overwrite destination object if the destination object exists. I could choose not to overwrite. If I could choose to overwrite only if it matches the specified entity tag, the e tag. And e tag matching rules allow you to control the copying or overwriting based on their e tag values. So I could do that, and some other options, right? So let me just copy this object right now, and you would see that sort of this kicks off this asynchronous process in the background where this happens, right? And if I if I view my work request here, you can see that my object has been copied. So if I go back to if I go to Phoenix region and click on test bucket, you can see that I have an object here which is existing. All right, so let's switch back to the slides and talk about another key capability, which is around object lifecycle management. So object lifecycle management defines, you can define lifecycle rules to automatically archive or delete objects after a specified number of days. Now, as we saw in the cross-region copy, you have to authorize the service to manage objects on your behalf. So you have to write a policy, otherwise this thing doesn't work. And it's pretty straightforward to create a lifecycle rule. You can create a rule like this, and then you can apply the rule at the bucket level or the object name prefix level. If no prefix is specified, the rule will apply to all the objects in the bucket. So what do we mean by that? If you see here, we have a couple of objects and they all have a prefix, which is this thing here. Uh, so for if you don't want if you don't want this life cycle management rule to apply to at the bucket level, you could actually apply it at the prefix level, and in this case the prefix is gloves 27. So you could use this kind of prefix to apply a rule. Otherwise you can apply the rule to all the objects in the bucket. A rule that deletes an object uh, uh, always takes priority over a rule that would archive the same object. And you can always enable or disable a rule to make it inactive or active, right? So it's pretty straightforward. So let me quickly jump to the console and show this in action. So if I go back to my console, I have the standard bucket here. I have an object here, right? So, so to create a lifecycle policy rules, we'll come down to this link here and create a rule here. And it says, okay, what is the rule? It picks up a default name. And what do I want to do as an action? Do I want to delete the object or do I want to archive the object? So, I'm saying archive is fine, and delete is fine. Let me just pick delete. And how many days do I need to keep it before I delete? So 30 days is fine. And then enabled or disabled, right now of course I'm creating the rule, so it's enabled, and now the policy is in place, right? And so the object will be deleted after 30 days. Now I didn't apply any filter in specific here, right? Like the prefix. If I had done that, I could pick and choose individual objects. I don't have to do it for all the objects, right? um, if I don't want this rule to apply anymore, I could just disable it instead of deleting it, right? So then now it's disabled, but it's still in the history, so I can get some more information here. So it's as simple as that, and it's really for managing the cost, managing your objects, because you'll be managing, literally hundreds of objects, right? So it's a good way to manage the life cycle of various objects in various stages, whether you want to delete them to save some cost or move them to archival storage to again to reduce the cost and keep them for long-term backup and retention. Last feature we are going to look into is multi-part upload. Multi-part upload, with multi-part upload, individual parts of an object can be uploaded in parallel to reduce the amount of time you spend uploading. In fact, in yesterday's, I was recording this other compute section, and I was uploading a custom image which was 2 gig in size. That's fairly good size. I mean, of course, it's not the we support objects up to 10 terabytes, so it's not in that perspective, it's not that big, but it's still fairly large file. So when you do upload a file like a 2 terabyte file, a 2 gigabyte file, or even something smaller than that, you would see that the service itself uses multi-part upload behind the scenes. You don't see that in action, but the service is actually doing that. Now you could do that. You could use multi-part upload using CLI or SDK. The way it happens is you create first thing you do is you create object parts. So you can see some numbers here. Individual parts can be as large as 50 gig or as small as 10 MB, right? So you could do that using the CLI. CLI does that for you, and it assigns a part number. Then it initiates an upload, and you can see the API call it makes to initiate an upload. Then it uploads the object part, and make sure that all the parts are uploaded. If you can restart a failed upload for an individual part, etc., and then you commit the upload. And I just want to quickly show you the documentation. If you see, there is the web page here, because I'm not showing this demo right now, but you can see all the parts listed here. Initiate the upload, upload the parts, and then commit the upload site. And there's a nice example here, and scroll down. There's a nice example here which shows this in action using the CLI. So I'm uploading this file. It has, I think, 12 parts, and you can see that the parts size, etc., the count, it shows here, and it's splitting the file into 12 parts for upload. And then it's uploading the file. You can list the parts of unfinished or failed uploads, if there are parts which failed to upload, and then you can remove them also, right, if there were parts which could not be uploaded. So the service takes care of breaking the files, uploading them, committing them, doing the checksums, making sure that it's all good. And as I said, if you're uploading some large files, the service actually does this internally, and but you could, as an end user, you could do this as well. So hopefully this module gave you a good overview of the four features we talked about: pre-authenticated request, cross-region copy, object lifecycle management, and multi-part upload. Thank you for watching this module. I hope you found it useful. Thank you.